Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the debut podcast episode of the Ummah, where we help decolonize your mind. Today we have the esteemed Sheikh Omar Baloch joining us as our special guest to talk to us about Caliphate. What does it really mean for Muslims and non-Muslims at large? To tell you a little bit about our esteemed guest, Sheikh Omar Baloch was a longtime student of the late Dr Israr Ahmed for 30 years. He also has a Master of Hypnosis in Euro-Linguistic Programming, which is actually quite interesting, and we can even have a separate show on that with you, brother Omar. Brother Omar Baloch also worked in IT for 10 years before starting in full-time Islamic work in the field of dawah and counseling. And he currently serves as an imam in the Chicago area. I'd like to welcome you, Sheikh Omar Baloch. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity, actually.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to having this hopefully very fruitful discussion with you concerning this very important topic. But before we get into the very juicy topic of Caliphate, we always want to get a backstory from our guest on the show. And I understand that your extensive work revolves around the Islamic worldview. We just want to know for the benefit of the listeners, when and how did Islam became a staple in your life and Islamic activism and scholarship. If you can just tell us like how that came about.
So I guess it happened in 3-4 different stages. I was born in Chicago, and pretty much my family was here till I was about 8 or 9. And there was a lot of good opportunities in the Middle East, and my dad got a job offer in Saudi Arabia in Dammam, and it was a great offer, so our family went. We were there for about 3 years, and so you could say my initial studies, at least in the Arabic language, started when I was in Saudi Arabia. I was studying in Manaf al-Sharqiyya in Dammam, which is a school there. And but after 3 years, my dad had an accident. He had a major surgery in his head. Those trucks with those pipes, you ever seen those trucks carrying the long, long pipes? Yeah. So one of those pipes went into my dad's head while he was traveling to work. And that became a major transition for our family because my dad was told, okay, you need to rest, you can't work too much, you can't put too much stress. And then our family decided to go to Pakistan. So this is where I got introduced to Dr. Israr Ahmed and many other scholars, but primarily Dr. Israr Ahmed at that time. And my dad, Dr. Israr Ahmed, had an academy called Quran Academy. And my dad started studying there. And then I started going there and, listening to his tafsirs because my dad was going there. So I was involved there. And then also the Madaris that are in Muslim Pura Lahore. Some of the teachers that are there, I started studying with them Islamic sciences. And so there's a few other things that happened. My dad was studying there, but I was actually going to the Lower American school, which was like a school for the kind of like elite. And, our family is like, you can say middle class, and these people were like super rich, and I would always feel like, oh, I don't have enough money for this, and they can do this, and I'd complain to my parents, I need more money, And anyway, all that led to me becoming more religious in a sense that the way events happen, you can say. So my dad was already religiously inclined, so that was one thing. And then I had the normal teenager rebellion kind of going on, and then when things didn't go well in school. So
you were going through normal teenage rebellion in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East?
No, this is in Pakistan.
Oh, okay, sorry, okay.
So my parents had moved to Pakistan.
Right? Okay.
And so while my dad was studying in Quran Academy, and so during those years I remember, but I found you could say, I guess I was kind of smart, you can say. So I found a lot of the intellectual stimulation I needed for my mind from the teachings of Dr. Israr Ahmed, and I kind of like just went in that direction, you can say.
How old were you when you met the late Dr. Israr Ahmed?
I probably met him when I was like 12 or 13.
Oh, that's pretty young.
12 years old. Yeah, and I started having my first tafsir lessons. I remember it was Dr Amin. I had my first tafsir lesson when I was like 12 years old.
Oh wow, that's pretty young.
Yeah, and I learned it in the masjid, and then come home and kind of like show it off to my uncles and my aunts. Yeah, I can translate this. I was very young at that time, obviously, but then all that like helped. You can say helped me in understanding Islam, and so yeah. And if you know anything about Israr Ahmed, his ideas are very sophisticated, and so I was kind of like helped in a way because he brought that to the table at a young age to me, right? And I had access to him, so I could go to his office, ask him questions, and now I realize that he didn't make it apparent so at that time, but I remember even the first question I ever asked him was I was reading his Reader's Digest about like if you go into the sujood position kind of thing, it helps the heart. And how Quran mentions in the very beginning, in their hearts is a disease. So I was trying to connect, if you do sujood, you won't have a disease. And he was telling me this has nothing to do with that. That's talking about a spiritual disease. And but he said that it's connected in another way, but that's a longer conversation. So he saw my progress over the years, and then like 20 years later, maybe there was an ISNA conference. I think 1995, 1996. You probably know what ISNA is, right?
Yes, yeah. Like back in our day,
ISNA conference. So 3 days before ISNA conference, we had our own organizational conference, and in that, Israr Ahmed said that it was in Columbus, Ohio. So he was like that. Columbus discovered America, and in Columbus, I discovered Omar Baloch. In the conference everything was there. So I was very close to him. I spent a lot of time studying his thoughts, comparing it with other, Khilafah movements, whether it be Ikhwan, whether it be Hizb ut-Tahrir, whether it be Al-Murabitun, or other good Islamic organizations. They're all working for Khilafah. And so it really gave me an opportunity to, kind of take the ideas of other organizations and run it by him and see what he thinks. And he was always very willing to change his ideas if he was convinced. He wasn't arrogant in that way, but you had to convince him. And you had to, if you were able to convince him, then his ideas, he would be willing to shift his ideas.
Yeah, like that's the kind of feedback I've received from others as well, in their meetings with Dr. Israr Ahmed. So like that. I mean, that's something that you're kind of corroborating, verifying as well. So it's always very interesting to get kind of a intimate insight as well on the way the late Dr. Israr Ahmed dealt with people individually. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no problem. I've seen you. It looks like you are one of the very few imams in North America, at least, who's very kind of bold and open and very vocal as to what needs to happen for the Muslims in the current situation they are, and then you're very open about it. And I know and I see that you're very kind of clear on what the end goal should be in terms of salvaging basically our Islam for Muslims in the world, and that brings us to the topic of Khilafah. Was in terms of you understanding the importance? Oh well, we can get into that if Khilafah is even if it's important for Muslims. Were you introduced to this idea by the late Dr. Israr Ahmed?
Yeah, so he had the Khilafah movement, and he used another term for it, based upon certain verses of the Quran, أَنْ أَقِيمُوا الدِّينَ وَلَا تَتَفَرَّقُوا فِيهِ. Establish the deen. The deen as a total system.
Exactly, yeah.
So that needs to be established. Now the goal is the happiness of Allah. That's the goal. And Quran is essential individual and his responsibility. Then you can say as it goes up, meaning if you think the highest level is political and the lowest level is individual, as you go up the ladder, the Quran has, for example, Quran has more verses about family law than it has about economic law, right? And has even less verses about political law, which is what confuses people sometimes, and they're not able to see things in, I think, sometimes the proper perspective. So, because from an Islamic perspective, it's the transformation of the individual that would bring everything else about. So the emphasis is on that, you know. The ultimate change is the individual, right? And the individual change, the goal of that is the happiness of Allah, whether you achieve your goal or not. But it's only natural that you have a goal from the very, if there's any organization or any ummah or any people, right, they must have a goal. Otherwise, you're just a crowd. You're just sitting together is going to do what? You have to have a goal. And that goal is also spiritually connected, because the more you're spiritually properly inclined, the more you'll be closer to reach your goal. And so the two are intricately connected to one another. The spirituality of the individual as well as the collective goal. I mean, this is why we talk about, for example, the Mahdi. Well, the Mahdi represents the individual transformation of being on guidance, and the word Mahdi, but also with that you have the idea of the revival of Islam. So the two are intricately connected. I don't want Khilafah because out of anger, for example, because a lot of Muslims, they want Khilafah because of the world headlines. No, not because of that just. Or because, out of a feeling this will, vindicate us in somehow. We got Khilafah. I mean, Khilafah is, it's the goal because it's set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's the most, because, I'll give you an example. This is a very important point, actually. Something is not fard because of how many times it's repeated in the Quran. Aqimus Salah is a command. It's repeated in the Quran throughout the whole Quran. It's a command. You have to do it. But if a command even comes once, it's still a command. There's no difference between, the ayat of Aqimus Salah and other ayat that give a command to do this or to do that. And there are many of them. But with Iqamat al-Din particularly, what's interesting is that the highest form of, even within commands, the highest form could be where there's a command to do it, followed by a command not to do the opposite. So, like, for example, there are three examples of that in the Quran, right? اعبدوا الله, worship Allah, ولا تشرك به شيئا. Then don't do any shirk with Allah. So both the command to do and a negation not to do. This is the highest form of command that you can find in the Quran. In the same way you find, for example, in Surah Al-Imran, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on to the rope of Allah, meaning Quran, وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and don't be separated. Highest form of command. And then again, in Surah Shura, you have أَنْ أَقِيمُوا الدِّينَ, establish the deen. That means deen as a whole, not as you can say not as a religion. Deen as the entire system of Islam, meaning it's one whole, organic whole. So أَنْ أَقِيمُوا الدِّينَ وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and don't be divided in this issue. And so, the thing that helps the collectivity to actually get somewhere is, I'll explain this in two ways. Maybe it will help. That there was a Jewish professor. He was talking about Jews in America, and he was talking about how freeing the Jews from Russia was a goal that the Jewish people had. Becoming an economic power was a goal the Jewish people had. The state of Israel was another goal that they had. But as they achieved each goal, he was saying, this was in Rutgers University about 20 years ago. As we achieved each goal, what happened is we lost our sense of common destiny, right? And so, what is the common destiny of all the Muslims? If we say we're an ummah, what's our common destiny? What is it? And without the idea of Khilafah, you have nothing to say, right? All you have is, then you have us labeled by our sects and our different groups and our different, without Khilafah there is no, and the second example I want to give is,
sorry, and
also very important.
Sorry, Sheikh,
Go ahead.
Sheikh Omar, I just wanted to add as well. I don't know if you're familiar with, he's actually an imam in Toronto, Sheikh Abdullah Hakim. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. Great. Okay. So he does seminars here. So he was talking about the revival of the Ummah and all that. So he made it's basically he shared an analogy of our situation in the world right now without the Islamic system in place, right? And it's he said that the Muslims are like right now they're basically like chickens running around with their heads cut off. That's what our situation is right now, and I think that's a pretty accurate one to put. And you can comment on that as well, but anyways, you can go on.
Yeah, absolutely, and it has a big psychological effect. See, if you don't have a sense of common destiny, then I'll give you an example. Like people complain, at the masjid, oh, nobody even puts the shoes in the shoes rack, so how are we going to have khilafah? I think it's the opposite. If we have the goal of khilafah, then people will start to put the shoes in the shoes rack. You see, because when you have a common destiny, when you have something that brings you closer to something bigger than yourself, that combines everyone together, then you'll start acting differently. It's like then there's a brotherhood, a stronger level of brotherhood. I mean, we have this kind of like, you could say like a cultural feeling of togetherness, that if something happens somewhere in Burma or something happens in Kashmir, we feel pain. Yes, that is there. But we're not acting as with same intent and same purpose, and that is clearly the reestablishment of Islam, and so it's pretty clear, because you can't, even psychologically and historically both, you can't run away from the legacy of the Khilafah of the 30 years. You can't run away from it. We will always judge ourselves based upon that time period, right? We will always judge ourselves based upon that time period. So that is the ideal. And as a civilization, if that is the ideal, then that's what we strive for. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't really make sense for me. I mean, if Jewish people can have a homeland, why can't Muslims have a homeland? I mean, just at an intellectual level, if anyone else is Muslim, it's pretty like. There shouldn't be a double standard.
Yeah, exactly.
And we shouldn't be scared to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, intellectually, they don't have, they can't. It's any of their counter rebuttals are basically absurd. Like if the secular liberals can have their own system, which basically they have, not only they have it for themselves, but they've shoved it down for other people in this world. Why can't the Muslims have their own system? And not only that, we argue that it's a much superior system for Muslims and non-Muslims to bring justice. Right?
So basically, we want an opportunity. We want an opportunity where we can say to the journalists and to the intellectuals and to the professors that let us establish Islam so that you can come and see what Islam looks like, rather than supporting these dictators that never gives us a chance to even show you what Islam is. Wouldn't you see? I mean, look, and let's also face it. Communism has failed. Socialism is failing. Democracy, we're at the end of democracy. We're at the end of capitalism. Where's the world going to go? Where's the world going to go? It's like Iqbal said, right? That you've tried every door. Now the only door you have left is the door of the Prophet. And so this is the only door that humanity has. But they don't want to give it a try because of, because of the issue of resources and oil and having control of these resources.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now jumping into, I think that would be a good transition to jump into the second part of our podcast, which is now we know, 95 plus years or so, Muslims are living without a central figure, without any Khalifa. So within the modern context, what do you propose that, Muslims living in Muslim lands, and you think the strategy should be different for Muslims living in the Muslim lands versus the strategy of Muslims living in the non-Muslim lands? and how can we go about, move forward in actually, putting our 2 cents in reviving the way of Islam again?
So there are a few questions there. First of all, the answer to your question, the general answer is all Muslims have the same obligation. All Muslims, regardless of where they are. The only difference is which stage you are in that. To me, essentially, there's no difference because of this reason. If you're living in the U.S., you have to start with da'wah. But you have to do the same in Pakistan, because those are just culturally born Muslims. They're not really convinced of it as an ideology. They have Iman, but they don't have the intellectual dimension of Iman, which Quran calls for.
Right.
قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ أَنَا وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِي. The problem of the Muslim today is that we're born Muslims, and we don't have, because the Sahaba, they weren't born, they actually accepted Islam. They saw it as the truth, right? They were cognizant. They had basira. So the Prophet is قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي, say this is my path, أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ, I call towards Allah with full insight. أَنَا وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِي, me and those who follow me, we have full insight into what we're doing. Our problem is, even if we have insight, it's into our mazhab, into our mazahib. That's just, me and my sheikh and my little group, right? And you spend the scholars of Islam spend most of their time doing what? Promoting their particular version of
Islam,
of Islamic mazhab, not Islam as a deen, but as a religion. But see, the West doesn't have a problem with you buying a church and opening a masjid. That's not the problem. The problem is not your individual religiosity. That's the problem. Over here, I want to mention 2 things. What is really the problem? The first problem is that the modern times has defined the role of religion. Okay? And if you go outside that role of what the role of religion is, then you are going to be doing something wrong. What is the role of religion in the modern times? How does modern sociology understand the role of religion? And what I'm going to say is going to hurt some people, but it needs to be thought about. And that is that the role of religion is the sanitary department. Okay? And that is that if you are in jail, you need God. Okay? So we have chaplains there. Nothing wrong with being a chaplain in jail, but I'm just talking about how in modern times the role of religion works. Number 2, if you need God, then you must be in a hospital, so chaplains are there. So people that need God, they need God. But don't, number 1. Number 2, the role of religion is to help humanity in their suffering. To help humanity, this is the role. You will never see a priest or a pastor on TV until there's a shooting in a high school or there's a big tragedy and people are suffering. Then they say, okay, pastor, what words can you offer to the people to, get over this tragedy or to deal with this tragedy? Unfortunately, we don't have a pill that can help with human suffering, so we still need religion. Okay, that piece of religion, that aspect of religion, modernity still accepts. But here's the difference. If, you open a hospital to help patients of AIDS, they will give you the grants to open up that hospital. But don't you dare stand up and criticize that lifestyle. That brings them to that hospital. Right? You want kitchen soups? Yes, help the poor people. Very good. You are putting a bandage on that system to just further its injustices.
Yeah, basically a band-aid.
So
basically a band-aid to the capitalist system, right?
Yes, and so you open a kitchen soup. Okay, very good. We'll give you a good salary for that too. But don't you dare stand up and start criticizing the injustices that bring people to that point.
Right.
Mother Teresa, the Nobel Prize winner lady, who is, people say, oh, well, what will God do with her? Well, tell me, did she say anything against the system that's in India, the caste system, and the other systems that are in place that create that poverty? For all the people she helped, she was just a bandage to the systemic problems that existed for which she never spoke up. And
So it reminds me of the modern day Islamic relief organizations.
Well, I have a clip that.
Yeah, you do. We did listen to it. Yeah, and we totally agree with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is exactly the problem: is that without talking about Muslim unity, without a proper structure of that Muslim unity, there is no. You're just abandoning. You can consider it, and again, please forgive me, but consider it like an impious virtuousness.
Yeah.
Impious virtuousness.
That's
you have the garb of virtue, but you're not helping the problem, really. Yeah. You're just exasperating the problem, and you're like, well, now that we took care of so many people, now who's your next target so we can continue making our salary?
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is that the issue is, and we don't even...
And this, about Islamic relief organizations, I want to say, that it's a double problem. Number one, the majority of the assets of the Muslims go to relief. Millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Because it's probably the easy way out.
So much better served if we had spent that in da'wah, if we had spent that to the youth, if we had spent that for our local masjid. We would be far ahead to actually be able to help the people abroad and the people that are suffering if we'd actually diverted all those funds to our local communities and to actually then make our community stronger, because when a community is stronger, it's actually able to do something rather than that direct help that we're always trying to do. And so, and it's very interesting because the more something is fought, the less money we give to it. So da'wah is fought, we give less money to it. Relief, sadaqah is sadaqah. We give more money to sadaqah and less money to fard.
Yeah.
And so things are like a little bit upside down.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be safe to say, and sorry because this is a very exciting topic, it gets me excited, so sorry if I interrupted you during your presentation. But what I also wanted to say is that it's very interesting you mentioned sadaqah and the obligation of inviting others to Islam, or dawah, or nasiyah. It's interesting, right? I mean, sadaqah is there to fill in the gaps, right? So once, say there's an Islamic system that is implemented, sadaqah is there to fill in the gap, right? Because...
like for example, zakah is fard. That will go to the state.
Exactly.
Right? So if this is another interesting point. A lot of our fara'id, I mean, honestly, we're in a very, very dubious situation without Khilafah. I'll give you one or two examples, if you don't mind. What's the difference between sadaqah and zakat? If someone knocks at your door during a Khilafah, somebody knocks at your door and says, hey, give me your zakat, right? And you say, no, I gave it to the poor people. He will not accept that you gave zakat. You still have to give zakat because it has to go to the Baytul Mal, the collective fund where then from there the priorities of the state or the civilization or the Khilafah is, whatever institute you want to call it, then they will decide how these funds need to be distributed. The essential difference between zakat and sadaqah is, sadaqah you give with your voluntary will, whoever you want. Whether it's your relative, your father, your mother, whoever it is. Zakat has to go to Baytul Mal. I mean, that's the essential difference, is that that's a collective fund where you put people's funds together collectively. Now people are giving zakat just like they give sadaqah. Right. Which is then essentially, let me decide what the priorities are and I'll put my funds there.
Absolutely.
So everyone's deciding what is their priorities and giving the funds according to that, that's what sadaqah is for. You want to give sadaqah, you want to give all your money, you want to give half your money, you can give it to whoever you like, wherever you like, whether it's Muslim, whether it's non-Muslim, give sadaqah however you want it.
Yeah, because just to add on to that point as well, because we living in Canada here, and then because has been a lot of discussion here as well that the tax money that the government takes, because we have a free healthcare here and free social services, which are state run. So there was also a conversation that essentially it is a zakat that the money we paying in taxation, because ultimately it gets spent on poor people, shelters.
So zakat is only for Muslim community building.
No,
so
actually, just to qualify what you just stated, Ali, is that actually the taxes we pay are basically interest payments on the money that the government borrows from the private sector. So basically, people have
upside down.
Yeah, people try to justify the unjustifiable, right? People think, okay, I'm living a halal lifestyle, and
But even that's dubious. Again, I'll give you another example. Let's take, for example, wudu. Okay, what are the conditions of water? How much does your wudu get affected if it has fluoride and all the other things in it? Does the taste remain the same? Does the color remain the same? Does the smell remain the same? Just even at a very basic level. So I'm not saying don't pray. Obviously, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying don't stop using it. It's always better to use more pure water from pure sources, like a well water or something like that. Yeah. But I'm just simply saying that without Khilafah, even our wudu is at least suspect.
Like we're Muslims, as I said, and I'm gonna use the catchphrase that we're like chickens running around with their heads cut off, and we're trying to practice our Islam at the same time. So we're dealing with the current situation that we're in, right? A very situation where we're still colonized, right? Like in our minds as well, right? And I just want to add what you just stated about, how religion is kept in the private sphere. This is a new phenomenon for humanity, actually. This whole compartmentalization of things is very new for humanity, because religion and culture was always considered the same, right? And now, so this is, we've given into this compartmentalization of our lives without even acknowledging or admitting that we're subject to this. So it's interesting you mentioned that this dawah process has to happen also in the Muslim majority countries, because we've taken
if our mind is, our brain is 80% colonized and 20% Islamic, then you have to convert the Muslims too.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you're legally Muslim. Legally Muslim means you're born Muslim. You say the Shahada. You're legally, but you're not convinced. How many people can you ask that are Muslims and say, okay, show me that part of the Quran that really convinced you this is the truth? Yeah. And then be able to open up the Quran and say, this is the ayah that did it.
Yeah. So that basically brings me back to that point as well. So in this modern context, how we started out this conversation. So the Muslims obviously living in the West, have to focus on dawah and etc. and everything else. Whereas the Muslims living in the Muslim majority lands right now, so they need to obviously carry out dawah, but I guess the strategy would be different, right? For example, what Islam has been doing, is basically propagating the true message of Islam and trying to, align people, coming back or looking at Islam as a deen, as a way of life, as a comprehensive way of life versus just the religion and going to the mosque and everything else. So I mean, and that's the Islamic focus is basically, Pakistan currently right now. And, how do you justify, I'm just trying to pick your brain right now. I know it's my question is packed with a lot of questions. For example, I believe in, personally, the boots on the ground, essentially, where you think, you're going to have the most effect, we should be striving in that part of the world. Do you agree with that, or?
So obviously there are certain parts of the world that will be more effective than other parts, but it's not symmetrical, it's asymmetrical. Like, for example, there are things I can say on YouTube sitting here in America that maybe even in people like in other places can't, right? I have access to certain research that they wouldn't even in Pakistan, for example, have.
Right.
Okay. So, but having said that, yes, the place you are makes a difference, but at the same time, I feel, and I'll give you an example, okay? Wherever till now, whether you look at Egypt, whether you look at Afghanistan, whether you look at any other place, wherever we have attempted to bring Islam, because it was, for various reasons, wherever we've attempted to bring Islam, something happened. Okay? Mm-hmm. In the case of Morsi, he's put in jail. In the case of Afghanistan, there was a war. So whatever it is, unless we have multiple fronts where they can't kind of like manipulate all of them, unless we're working at multiple fronts, and if we only have one or two fronts, it's easy to to deal with it. But if you have like 10 different fronts, then it's harder to deal with it. Then one of them will succeed.
You know, that's a
So
very...
no matter where you are, you should do the work. And then you should also think about, okay, where should I make hijrah to do more of it?
Right.
But
you all, I mean, bringing eschatology in right now as well. You know, in some of your videos, you also talk about, you know, because you've been obviously a student of Sheikh Imam as well, and whose work, you know, I think we all admire. And you know, you see in your, correct me if I'm wrong, so we Muslims need to work and need to talk about the Khilafah more, but at the same time, are we to sit idle and wait for the Mahdi to come in, or you believe that
the opposite?
It's the opposite, okay?
The opposite. We need to work for Khilafah as if Mahdi is not coming.
Okay, fair enough.
Number one. Number two, if the Mahdi comes, we need to be ready to go to him.
Right.
So look, the obligation the obligations are the obligations, regardless of time. The establishment of the deen is like salah. You have to do it. So waiting for the Mahdi to come, that's not even for waiting for the Mahdi to come here. Let me clarify. The only way would be that, let's say if the Mahdi is coming in the next 20, 30 years, you would have to disassociate from the city life as things progress in the direction that they are.
Right.
Because, you know, the Dajjal will be in the cities. And this is a longer discussion. But if you were to survive the malhama, these wars that are coming, you would have to be able to be outside the city. You can't survive in the city. It's going to be chaos.
Right.
So you're going to have to establish a jama'ah, a Muslim village, something to protect you, like Ashabul Kahf, for that time period where that chaos will be happening. And then in that time period, you're going to learn how to, as a jama'ah, as a village or whatever you want to call it, you're going to have to learn to operate as an organization.
Right.
And in that, or now you have, because now there's a vacuum in the world, you can now actually, in some parts of the world, you may be actually able to live according to Islam again.
Due to the vacuum, yeah. And what do you suggest people living in the Western countries right now do in terms of, you know, preparing themselves, you know, before?
I think that we have to all start buying gold and silver, and we have to start looking for land, either collectively or at least individually, outside the cities.
Within the Western land?
If you're not going to go outside, then yes.
Right.
You know, not everyone can just leave, and not
right.
everyone will be able to have the resources to leave. So within the West, you should look for land that's outside the city. You need more than one plan. You need the plan of hijrah, but you should also have a plan of like, okay, if I'm stuck here and, you know, and then if I'm stuck here, what am I going to do? What are we going to do?
Yeah, but
we have to have.
So sorry, I was going to make a comment, but the issue with what you just what your brothers are stating is that you're still subject to the very system.
No, because once the system falls, right? Maybe I'm not clarifying this. Once the system falls, you can have your own economy. And let me just over here mention, the real thing is not the politics. The real thing is the economy. The real thing is the money, the currency.
Yeah,
it's this paper money that is the real driving force behind everything.
Right.
The only way for any Muslim country also is the first thing that you have to do is to get rid of this paper money and to kind of like completely create a new, because, you know, if any Muslim country starts bringing Islam, and as long as they're using paper money, the first thing they're going to do is to inflate and deflate the currency and create a economic havoc, which they're going to try to do now with Pakistan, what they've been trying to do with Venezuela. I mean, it's very easy. They just target a country and just play with its currency because the currency is under them, the banks,
right,
the Federal Reserve.
And also now, like, you know, so correct me if I'm wrong. So you are also.
So the scenario that I'm talking about being ready is if there is a war, a big war in the world, then, you know, oil will be stopped. Okay. And if oil is stopped, that will create havoc in cities. No one can go anywhere. No one can do anything. If you remember Katrina, Katrina?
Yep.
What happened? It'll be like Katrina, but the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
So now in that situation, what do Muslims do? The Prophet also said, when you hear that sound, the sound that every nation will think that the other nation has been destroyed, and when you see the fire in the skies, then prepare food for 1 year. This is what the Prophet said. Right. Nu'man bin Hamad has written this in his Kitab al-Fiqh. And so you prepare this, prepare some place, because the city is going to be chaos. So now you need to take Muslims in a land where they can go and organize themselves and, have an amir, have a shura, have multiple families living somewhere. Like, I was just as an idea, I was thinking of, there's a land in Colorado, for example. And Colorado may not be the best place, but that's just an example I'm giving. In Colorado, there's a land of, 200 acres, only like, I think $60,000, right?
Right.
And so, create a Muslim village and tell Muslims, okay, when you need to come, then this is the place to go. But you don't have to do it at that level. You can do it at smaller scale. Each person can, families coming together can buy some land where they have their own water, where they have their own animals, they have their own crops, and it's very natural because you have one cow, he's going to give you milk for the whole family every day. And one cow needs only 1 acre of land for the whole year. And then that whole acre recycles itself automatically by nature.
Mm.
That's interesting. Yeah, because also, the Murabitan movement as well, they also, even, you probably know, Sheikh Omar Baloch as well. Initially his focus was also in Malaysia and Indonesia as well, where he was trying to implement the waqf system and also the muamalat, reviving that, the Islamic market. And the World Islamic Mint and all that kind of stuff. And so you're saying that, at the same time, we also need to be, prepared to work within the Jama'ah itself and, having, so-called, for the lack of better words, mini states, like mini villages where, we are
just
running
a group, just a Jama'ah. It doesn't have to be a city or just a Jama'ah. Because living in a Jama'ah situation where there's a need and you have to listen to him and you don't like what he's saying, or you disagree with him, this is part of the training. This is part of it. This is the problem with the Muslims is that we're free to do whatever I like. I don't have to listen to anyone. But when you have an emir on top of you, he's going to tell you to do something sometimes that you don't want to do.
Right.
Not you're going to feel like, oh, I should have been in charge of that. Why did he make that? Somebody else in charge instead of me. And Jama'ah is very good and very healthy for the human ego. And a Jama'ah is also training. It's like marriage.
Yeah, there's ups and downs, and you just have to be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
Brother Omar, just going to backtrack a little from this topic, but are you still...
about being in the Jama'ah and having a Jama'ah, I just want to mention, Yadullahi fawqa al-Jama'ah. The Prophet says, أَعْمُرُكُمْ بِخَمْسٍ اللَّهُ أَمَرَنِي بِهِنَّ. I order you of 5 things Allah has commanded me for them. بِالْجَمَاعَةِ وَالصَّمَاءِ وَعَطَاءِ وَالْهِجْرَةِ وَجِهَادٍ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. To be in the Jama'ah and to listen and to obey. And to do hijrah, meaning leave the things Allah doesn't want. And to do jihad, fi sabilillah. And to jihad, meaning move towards the things Allah likes. Hijrah, stay away from the things Allah doesn't like.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Brother Omar. Brother Omar, I just wanted to just backtrack a little. Are you still involved with the Tanzim Islam in Pakistan? No,
I'm not directly involved with them at the moment.
Okay. No. Because I want to go back to the original question of Brother Ali, who had mentioned in terms of the practical steps to be done. Now, if you talk to many of the brothers from Hizb ut-Tahrir, they'll say that Khilafah most likely the best place for it to emerge is in Pakistan. I don't know if you agree with that, but if you want, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Pakistan's a good place to try to bring the Khilafah. There's no question about it.
Yep. Now, the thing is, for example, what would be the practical because as you said, our minds are colonized, we're 80-90% colonized, right? It'd be safe to say that in Pakistan, that's what the situation is. So in terms of the practical stuff, and it's something very, very good you mentioned that you need people working together on various elements of society, and even with the elites in society to bring about this change. Do you see any kind of movement like that taking place right now in Pakistan, or any start of or inclination towards that?
I mean, you know, within the religious groups, it's possible to start that conversation, but usually revolutions happen when the economy is doing bad and people are in a dire situation. You know, one of the miracles of the Prophet is that Quraysh was doing great. You know, the ilafi Quraysh, ilafi Rahim. And despite that, a revolution took place, which I think is the only of its kind in human history, because the Russian Revolution was a peasant revolution, essentially. And you had the same thing with the French Revolution. You had the same thing with the Mao Chinese Revolution. And so anyway, that's just a side point. But how will you bring about this revolution? Okay, so I'm going to give you a scenario. Let's say we're here in the U.S., right? In the market of ideas, you have to convince the people of your ideas. Okay, this is like obvious, right? But I'm going to talk about the next few steps. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, like for example, Battle of Badr, there were volunteers on the side of the Muslims and there were volunteers on the side of the Quraysh. Okay, they had swords, they had swords. Okay, and so there was some level of symmetry. Okay. And even Quran says, if you remember the verse, it says that if you have strong iman, then one of you will be able to fight 10. Right?
Yeah.
And if you have weak iman, then one of you will be able to fight 2. So here is a number value Quran is giving in terms of any revolutionary movement. Right? In Makkah, the Prophet was there. There was only da'wah, the war of ideas. Okay? And then after Makkah, it changed into armed conflict. Now, the situation we're in, you can go on the idea of market of ideas, but instead of armed conflict, you're going to have civil disobedience. And the reason is because there's no symmetry. A nation state, the particular environment we live in, you can't fight against the army. The civilians cannot fight against the army. It's impossible. There's no way that, let's say, a jama'ah of any number, any regular number, can fight off a military and the paratroopers and stuff. So let's say that you do da'wah in America, and now so many people know about Islam that every household has somebody that's Muslim. Okay? And that means Muslims have been tortured, Muslims have been suffering, but Islam is the talk of the town. Everyone's talking about Islam. And if you have a critical number that have bought meaning if the sons of the soil buy the idea of Islam, if they theoretically buy the idea of Islam, okay? If the sons of the soil buy the idea of Islam, and there's a critical mass that's with me now, let's say 500,000 people, okay? So now you have a jama'ah with 500,000 people. Majority of the people are converts to Islam. They have suffered in different ways, okay? Now what you have to do, instead of that, you can say armed conflict, you have to, within a state, as long as you have this situation where you have a nation state, because armies are meant to fight outsiders, not insiders, okay? Right. Generally speaking. Israel is a different situation because that's outsiders and insiders. So it won't 100% work there.
Sheikh Omar,
the only way is to block the system. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's a very interesting point you made. Would that be analogous to what happened in Cuba with under Castro?
Yes, I will give you some examples of that historically. Yeah. I'll come to that, and also give you the fiqhi tawjih for that, the fiqhi, you can say, reasoning for what I'm saying. So now, under a nation state, you block the system. You do what happened in Hudaybiyah, basically, in some ways. But you block the system. We're not leaving till you give in to our demands. Now the country has 2 options. Either they give in to your demands, or now they have to take action against you, right? They bring out the military. But the military can't continuously fight its own people. Can't keep shooting its own white people. Okay? And so this is what happened. In Iran, Khomeini gave a fatwa, you cannot leave the house, you have to leave the house after 8 o'clock. meaning come into the streets. It's haram to stay inside the house. And the king, the Shah of Iran, had said there's martial law after 8 o'clock. So now when the people come to the streets, now the Iranian army is shooting its own people, right? So how much are they going to shoot? 500, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 20,000. They have to finally lay down their arms. They can't continuously kill their own people. So you cannot have an armed conflict with a nation state. You can only block a system and then force the system to shut down in a nation state situation.
But didn't didn't that? I mean, and again, you're probably knowledgeable in this area, but in terms of Egypt, what happened in Egypt, isn't it safe to say that
Islam can't come through elections?
No.
And I wish somebody. Oh, go ahead.
What I meant was before that, like you had the Arab Spring, right? And wasn't it that the majority of the Egyptians were against the government, but the army still held them down? There were many.
Go ahead. System properly, in the sense that I'm saying, but because there were many reasons for that. But the Arab Spring also had many different types of groups. You had the secularist groups with the Islamic groups with the. It wasn't one Jama'ah. Mm-hmm. It wasn't one force, right? It didn't have the power of one force.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason they had to hold elections afterwards, because they were together on this issue, but they weren't together as a whole. They weren't together.
I see. Okay.
So, yeah.
So basically,
but the methodology which you described, obviously, that Tanzim Islam is, Dr. Israr emphasized on that quite a bit as well, because I read some of his work. And so would you, Sheikh Omar, also say that, if you have a critical number, but at the same time, what about, seeking Nusra, how Hizb ut-Tahrir looks at the methodology? They say, well, we have to work on the grassroots level, but at the same time, we have to.
So we work at the grassroots level, but I don't believe that, or this is an opinion, and Hizb ut-Tahrir is an intellectual group of people. They know what they're saying, and they have their ideas. I don't happen to not agree with them in this issue, which is that you can't go from just street preaching to Khilafah. Mm-hmm. I don't consider Medina to be an Islamic state. This is the essential difference. You had the da'wah in Mecca, then you had the Nusra in Medina, and Fath in Fath al-Makkah. Fath al-Makkah is where the actual Islamic state happened. Mm-hmm. Okay? إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا إنا فتحنا لك فتحا مبينا. This is Hudaybiyah. Why? Because now the opposition has accepted you as their leader. Right? Mm-hmm. This was the biggest victory. Now that they accepted the Prophet as a leader, half of Arabia went with the Prophet and half of Arabia went with Quraysh. Mm-hmm. And so that was the actual legal moment where he became like the leader of a state, you could say. The time before that, Medina, it was like a jama'ah. They were working as a community and as a jama'ah. They weren't working as a state. And I'll give you an example for that. While the Prophet was in Medina, the people that left Uhud, 300 people left the battle. They didn't go. The Prophet never asked anyone, why did you not go to the battle? He couldn't punish any, because by definition, you can punish the people for doing something wrong. Then in Tabuk, later on, after the revolution takes place, after Fath al-Makkah, 3 of the companions don't go. They're put into a severe punishment. Why didn't you go? Right? Malik bin Ka'ab, you know his story. He said, I could have lied, but I don't want to lie. And so the reason is I got lazy and I didn't go. He asked each and every person, why didn't you go? Why didn't you go to the battle? Each and every person was asked. So that's just one example. And there are many other examples. Misaqul Medina, the covenant the Prophet made with the people of Medina, shows that it was more like a federation of groups working together. The Prophet didn't have control over any of these groups until Fath al-Makkah.
It was mostly voluntary, you can say. It was not, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to get into a debate on if Medina was a state or not, but what I want to get at is in terms of methodology. So in terms of, Just looking at from looking at it rationally.
So we're saying.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
You need to. Part of it has to be organizing, not just changing the ideology of the people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to organize the people to train them for that eventual change.
Implementation of Islam, yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, just looking at it rationally. If there's say there's an area, right? You have people, and you have the people who in power, right? And you need to change the ideas of the people, and you got to change the ideas on who are in power, right? So it has to work.
Yes, you do. You have to do that.
You have to do both.
And the Prophet did that in the very beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, Abu Bakr and Khadija and Uthman, these were part of the elite, the Ahlul Hal wal Aqd of that society.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to have a critical number of the elite of the society to be on your side.
Yeah, like I mean, no matter if you consider Medina as a state or not, nonetheless the Deen was being implemented by the essential power, by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in Medina, right? And the way he did it was, first, the people were accepting of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he came in and he led, like, just to put it on a very cursory level, right? So when you're looking at a place like Pakistan, which is a Muslim majority country, right, the people are following the same Aqidah that the people here are following, the Aqidah of the West, the Aqidah of liberalism, individualism, secularism, right? And the same thing is with the army as well. The army, you might have some good people in the army, but more or less,
the army is most secular.
Yeah, most secular, right? Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting. Earlier on in this interview, you had mentioned that you need different people working in different areas to close the gap, and then something will happen, right? On a solid foundation. So what I also see is this unity among Muslim organizations who have the same end goal, but due to their squabbles, they cut off from each other. And this is not an intelligent way to do things. If you can comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The organizations that are working for Khilafah should work with each other, should talk to each other, and should cooperate with one another, for sure, 100%, because we're already at a disadvantage.
Exactly.
And then we're just putting ourselves into a further disadvantage. I'll give you an example. You had the Women's Liberation Movement is the organization, but no one knows about the organization. Everyone just knows about their ideas. Mm-hmm. The ideas the Women's Liberation Movement wanted to know about, men are equal to women. Everyone knows the ideas. Not very many people know about the organization. And so we want it to be like that, where everyone knows about Khilafah. Now, if everyone chooses an organization, well, then there'll be more than enough people for every organization.
Right.
So
exactly. Well, man, this has been great. I mean, we've gone over time.
We definitely need a part 2 for this.
Yeah, we have really gone over time, but man, we like you, Brother Omar, to have you back on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it was my pleasure too. May Allah bless you in your works, inshallah.
Yeah, you too. Keep up the great work. I actually saw your recent khutbah. That was a really good commentary on the tragic events that happened.
Well, wait till today's release.
Okay, all right, okay.
Looking forward to that.
In a khutbah, when you have all sorts of people, so sometimes I don't say certain things that I do when I'm just doing myself on my screen. The thing that I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brother Omar. Thank you, Brother Ali. And I thank everyone who's listening out there. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.